The lifting of sanctions against Syria has topped the agenda at a meeting of European and Arab leaders in Riyadh. EU leaders agreed to discuss sanctions relief at the end of this month in Brussels. The new Syrian administration has called for their removal since December, when Bashar al-Assad was ousted. But Germany's foreign minister says some sanctions must remain in place. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan al Saud, has given a statement after the meeting of Arab and Western diplomats in Riyadh. He's called for the lifting of sanctions on Syria, which has been a key demand of the new administration.
The future of Syria is a Syrian internal matter. We confirm that we will continue providing all the humanitarian and economic aid, and to achieve stability, construction, paving the way for the proper environment for Syrians to go back to their country. A lot of things will be done, and we will do our best to enable the Syrian administration to provide necessary services to the Syrian people. We also confirm the necessity of lifting sanctions imposed on Syria, because these sanctions hinder the ambitions of Syrian people in development and reconstruction.
I want to give you a closer look at the sanctions in Syria, which have been in place since 2011. They've been targeting its financial transactions, oil exports and trade, amongst others. Since then, its economy has shrunk by 85%. Its GDP has dropped from $67.5 billion to $9 billion in 2023. 90% of Syrians now live in extreme poverty. Nearly 13 million don't have enough food. The sanctions also made it difficult to bring in aid and medical supplies, and experts estimate it could take a decade to return to 2011's GDP and another decade to fully rebuild the country. I'm going to cross to Mohammed Jamjoom, who's live for us in Damascus. Let's talk about the meeting in Riyadh first of all. That was a very short, but fairly broad statement by Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, nevertheless focusing on the need to lift those sanctions.
Yeah, that's right, Rob. I mean, that's certainly the headline of the day. Obviously, you had coming into this very significant meeting the fact that the new Syrian administration has said for weeks now that of utmost importance to them is that the international community ensures that those crippling sanctions be lifted so that Syria can move forward, start rebuilding its economy, get much needed aid into the people who are suffering inside of Syria. Now you've heard from EU leaders earlier in the day. They had said that there's going to be a meeting in a few weeks' time at the end of January in which that will be discussed, how to lift at least some of the sanctions potentially on Syria going forward. Then you have this very short statement from the Saudi foreign minister after the meeting had ended, in which he said that one of the things that was discussed of utmost importance was the necessity of lifting sanctions. The Saudi foreign minister also said that the future of Syria is an internal matter for Syrians to decide, and he said that the Saudis and other Gulf countries and other countries in general are going to continue economic aid to enable the administration in Syria to provide much needed services to the Syrian people. But at the heart, the core of the matter today was the issue of the sanctions. Obviously, this is going to be music to the ears of the Syrian administration, who've been urging this for weeks now. I just want to mention one more thing. Of course, there was this meeting today. This is sort of a continuation of a meeting that took place in mid-December in Aqaba in Jordan, in which there was much more of a presence of regional leaders, Arab League figures, and Arab foreign ministers. At that meeting, it was stated that there was going to be a need to provide more humanitarian aid to get into Syria. The meeting today had a much more expanded international presence, but another key difference between both meetings is the presence of a Syrian official. In this case, of course, the Syrian foreign minister, Asad al-Shibani. In December, he had not yet been appointed as Syrian foreign minister. There was no Syrian presence at that last meeting. Today, there was a Syrian presence, which meant there was more pressure on all the diplomats and international actors that were involved to try and make sure that the important issues were discussed and that they could try to find solutions going forward. And one of the key things they wanted to talk about was how to try to lift sanctions going forward. Rob?
Yeah, you were just talking about the humanitarian aid from that was mentioned in that previous meeting, and we were just going through that list there, of course, of the way that the sanctions have impacted the lives of ordinary Syrians. One would imagine that lifting those sanctions is going to have a huge effect on the country, and particularly the daily lives of Syrians.
Yeah, that's right, Rob. I mean, just in the couple of days that I've been here speaking to Syrians, they've told me about how crippling, on a very personal level, those sanctions have been these past several years. The fact of the matter is, they say that this makes it extremely difficult for them to get the kind of medications they need, to get the kind of food food aid that they need, which is one of the things you mentioned when you were talking about the impact of the sanctions just a few moments ago. Effectively, what these sanctions mean over the last several years is that Syria cannot import or export raw or material goods, right? And one of the things that makes it very difficult when it comes to these sanctions for Syrians is getting aid into the country, because what happens is even when there are waivers for certain aid groups to try to get humanitarian aid into the country, the fact of the matter is that because sanctions are still in place, that means that financial institutions and private companies that might otherwise help these aid groups and these NGOs get aid into Syria, they're worried of running afoul of international law and getting in trouble because of those sanctions. So that creates a chilling effect. So that means that even when there are humanitarian pauses, when there are waivers, when it means that aid should be flowing more freely into Syria, it's not as easy as it sounds. Now, in the last few days, you had the U.S. announce that they're going to be easing sanctions and providing waivers, in the next 6 months. But again, there needs to be a mechanism in place to ensure that there is a free flow of aid and goods into the country. And that's another thing that was very much discussed at that meeting in Riyadh today. Rob?
Mohammed Jamjoom in Damascus. Mohammed, thank you very much indeed.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.